Okay. I had to turn the recording on. We may actually come up with some neat revelation. Okay. All right. Move everybody out of the way so I can read. When you come into the land of which I give you, and reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest.
I think this is really significant.
Okay. How? What?
Okay. Speak unto the children of Israel. So that's who's being spoken to, are the people, the whole nation. And when you, the nation of Israel, come into the land which I give you, and reap the harvest thereof, then you, people of Israel, shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. So the correct way for this to be done, according to the scripture, is for each farmer to bring a sheaf to the priest, not for the priest to harvest it and offer it up.
And I was talking to some people yesterday, and there are others who agree with that. People bring the sheath to the priest.
Yes.
Well, I would think so.
But the church speak and what we were taught previously by whenever is that the Levites or the priests went out into the field, or the rabbits went out into the field and cut the grain at night.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if everyone remembers that.
So, in other words, they could harvest at any time before this, because they needed to harvest it before this day in order to do it. So,
So there's not a specific time. It's whenever it needs to be harvested.
2 weeks before, well, as we go down, we'll read, the issue was when they could eat of the new harvest. It needed to be consecrated before they could eat it.
The way it was taught before was the priest had to cut the first sheaf and then they could begin the harvest.
Ah.
Yes.
It doesn't say that.
No.
So I'm just piloting here. Any other scriptures you need to look
Continue reading so we can get the whole flow of it.
Okay.
I mean, you did 9 and 10, but you didn't do 11, and I don't
Oh,
know
I'm
what
sorry. I
comes in
went the wrong
12.
way. Okay. All right. And, okay, now the priest has the wheat that has been, or the grain that has been brought to the high priest, or to the priest. Now the priest has it. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you on the morrow after the Sabbath. The priest shall wave it. And you shall offer that day when ye shall, forget that, let's go down this one here. And I'm going to go with the Tanakh. On the day that you elevate the sheath, you shall offer as a burnt offering to the Lord a lamb of the first year without blemish. The meat offering with it will be 2/10 of a measure of choice flour choice flour with oil mixed in, an offering by fire, a pleasant odor to the Lord. Libation with it shall be wine a quarter of a hind. Need me to go any further, or?
Yeah, we could. This is a key verse here.
Okay. Until that very day, until you have brought the offering of your God, you shall eat no bread or parched grain or fresh ears. It is a law for all time through the ages in all your settlements. And from the day on which you bring the... Great job reading here today. You bring the sheaf of elevation offering. The day after the Sabbath, you will count off 7 weeks. They must be complete. You must count until the day after the 7th week, 50 days. Then you shall bring an offering of new grain to the Lord. And then they go into the 2 loaves and the Pentecost offering. Okay, so they can't eat any grain at all, or any of the new harvest?
Any of the new harvest.
I know it doesn't say it here, but what would be available to have harvested at this time?
Barley.
Okay, so it's in its green ears on the 1st of the month, and it would have finished maturing, and they would have harvested the barley before the spring holy days.
Yes. Or if it was not ready for harvest, it talks about that they could get an immature, just a slightly immature ear, and dry it and even parch it, to dry it out, as long as it has enough starch in it to make a flour. So there's a little bit of float on the harvesting, the actual harvesting. But the point of looking for the green ear was whether they would have barley that could be made into a bread by this time. So that if it wasn't at that certain point, then there would be no grain that could be used for this offering. So that's why it was very important to search for the ears, do the green ear search, the Abib search.
Okay.
I have a comment.
And it doesn't...
I don't know if it's relative or not, but when Christ first rose, he was by his tomb, and the women came by and asked, "Who are you looking for?" thinking he was a gardener. Well, I believe Christ was viewed as a gardener because he was probably picking grains out for the wave sheet offering before he ascended up to heaven to his Father to be accepted. And then later he came back that day. I could be wrong, but it's just an idea.
Debbie, I think you had a comment. Thank you.
One thing it doesn't say is that the harvest has to be completed by this day. It's just that the first sheaf has to be taken in to the priests on this day so that they can wave it. So the harvest would have begun But it doesn't say that it had to be complete. So if you had to parch some grain to be able to get the wave sheaf, you can finish the harvest after that. It's just that you couldn't eat the grain if the harvest was completed before this day happened.
Okay, a couple of nice points.
Now, another thing here that's very critical is you'll notice that it has the word weeks in there. And so and if you look at the Septuagint and compare it, it'll use the word weeks where the literal Hebrew will use the word Sabbath. And that's the distinction why the Orthodox Jews will do it 7 weeks after the morrow, after the first day of unleavened bread, and the Karaites do it 7 weeks after the morrow of the weekly Sabbath, like we do. So there's a distinguishing thing there, and it shows up in the Greek translation that they'll use the word weeks where the literal Hebrew will use the word Sabbath. And so the word for, there's a Shabbat versus Shavua. And Shavua is a week. And so the Greek translates it into week, whereas a strict Hebrew will translate it into Sabbath in a couple spots.
Okay.
Okay, in 11, in the LXE, in Leviticus 23:11, it says, on the morrow of the first day. And in King James it says, the morrow after the Sabbath. So that would put it on Monday, wouldn't it?
No, of the first day, in the morning of, not after. First day of the week, Sunday.
I caught your humor, Peggy.
But it says the morrow of the first day, so it's the next day of the first day. The morrow after the Sabbath. I guess what does morrow mean?
You could see why they came up with the Monday Pentecost.
Yeah, really. So it's the day, tomorrow is the day after. So on the day after of the first day. I'm just nitpicking, but...
Reads it there in plain English translated from the Greek. But now we got to go back to the Hebrew.
Okay. Okay, if you get on the word says the morrow, the day following a past day, on the morrow equals after the Sabbath, of the morrow, after a day specified in law.
Yeah.
So
see
the
what it's saying
translation is just kind of weird.
No, what it's saying in the Greek which agrees with the way the rabbinic Jews do it now, is that you do it on the morrow of the first day of unleavened bread. See why the Orthodox do it that way? Because there it says the morrow of the first day of unleavened bread, not the weekly Sabbath. And the Karaites go strictly by the Hebrew, and it says you lift it on the day after the Sabbath, the morrow after the Sabbath. And the Greek says you lift it up on the morrow after the first day of unleavened bread.
Well, where does it say that in the Greek? In
Where it says
Leviticus?
the first day, that's referring to the first day of unleavened bread.
No, where's the reference? I mean, are you talking Leviticus 23:11?
Yes. Yes. So you see the difference in the understandings. So the rabbis are actually going according to the Greek Septuagint more literally, while the Karaites don't accept the Greek Septuagint at all.
I don't get where you're getting that from. But
See, the first day is the first day of unleavened bread. That's
no, Mike, what okay, dear, the LXE is the Septuagint, the Greek,
okay.
translated into English. And what he's saying, if you see my cursor
the
here,
morrow of the
first day.
of unleavened bread.
But it doesn't say unleavened bread. That's why I want to kind of go back and see what
I was assuming the first day of the week.
And he's saying the first day of unleavened bread.
Yes.
Which is why the rabbinics do Sivan 6. If you do it this way, it'll always be on Sivan 6.
Right.
And if it's on Sivan 6, to me, what's the sense in counting?
Yes.
Why does it tell you later to count? There's no need to count if it's always a given day. When all of God's other holy days, when they're a given day, He tells you it's the first month on the 15th day. It's the first month on the 21st day.
Right.
It's the 7th month on the 1st, 10th, and 15th day.
Yeah, exactly.
There's something, and I'm trying to get with what Mike's doing. I'm trying to figure out how to see what the first day means in 11. What does it mean by the first day?
Right. That's what I want to know. The first day of the week, or is it the first day of the holy day?
Right. That's what I was trying to.
What was it written in?
Written in Greek.
The Old Testament is written in Greek?
It would have been written in Hebrew. The Old
No.
Testament
Okay. The Septuagint, millions of billions of whatever, however, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, somebody took some original transcripts, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, and translated them into Greek. That is the Septuagint. Okay. This, before all that stuff went bye-bye, got destroyed, everything else, and lost, somebody translated it into Greek. That's what the Septuagint is.
Yeah.
And that is what a lot of people go by, because it came off of an original transcript that was not adulterated.
Yes, but isn't it ironic that they say it was the rabbinic Jews that did the adulterating because of their, to match their doctrines, when it was the rabbinics are following the Greek. There's a point of skipped logic there with those people that believe that.
And where does the Tanakh come from?
Tanakh is a modern English translation of the Hebrew Masoretic text.
Okay, so is the Masoretic an original, or is it a redo back from Greek?
No, it's what the Jews had kept through their process of where they they have a very elaborate process for making a new manuscript.
Right.
And it has to be perfectly correct, every jot and every tittle correct, or they gotta throw it away and start the whole thing over.
Okay, so if you go to the Tanakh, it says, "Shall elevate it on the day after the Sabbath." So exactly. if the Masoretic is in Hebrew and is from the original Hebrew, you can take, in this case, and take the Greek and go throw it out the window, because you now have Hebrew to English that's been preserved.
Exactly.
And that answers the question.
That's my thinking.
It is and that's what we have to get to, is simple logic. Not that I've got it figured out, but we've now went back to what it was originally written in, what was originally preserved, and what was translated to English, and it says on the day after the Sabbath. Now the question is this the same word for Sabbath, meaning a weekly Sabbath, or would it be the word that is used sometimes to represent a high day? Right, Mike?
Yes.
Okay, now, the WTT, what is that, Mike?
The WTT is the Masoretic text.
Okay, so we got we got the Masoretic text in its original form in front of us here, and the translation as I cursor over it, and the Jewish Hebrew whatever society's publication of the Tanakh, which is this, in English. And these two are actually matching nicely.
Yes.
Yeah, you get about to the end of it and it says Sabbath on the seventh day. So it's the morrow after the seventh day.
Yes.
It is not the morrow after the high day, which would be Sukkoth?
Well,
a high day is a different, Holy Convocation is different than a Sabbath.
Okay, now the way to correlate that is out of the next few verses. If you compare where it says Sabbath in the Tanakh and week in the LXE. Here we go.
See, what verse is that?
15.
Okay. Yeah, so LXE says it says 7 full weeks. Tanakh says they count 7 weeks. Trying to follow the Hebrew.
Well, in the WTT, the Sabbath in verse 11 is the third word from the left.
Right. It's an adjective, female, singular, absolute.
See, now you've lost me.
Okay, here we're going to go through what it's saying here. Relate or count. Okay, preparatory indicating direction. Morrow or day after. Sabbath. Singular, absolute.
No, yes.
Yeah, that one is singular, absolute. Day. Okay. Come, go, in, go. Okay. Marcos. Okay. Okay. Sheaf or omer. Swinging, waving, wave offering. Oops. 7.
That's
Again.
Shabu.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the number 7, Shabu.
Okay.
See how it's similar to Sabbath?
Okay, now, The first Sabbath was singular absolute. This one is a noun common both plural, meaning Sabbaths, two or more.
Yes, it's not weeks, it's Sabbaths. But you see, even in the Tanakh, because Jews did it, they changed it to weeks. See how they changed? Even in the Tanakh, they didn't follow the Masoretic. Because it's, you count 7 Sabbaths, not 7 weeks. Weeks are, plural is Shavuot, not Shabbat.
So the morrow after the Sabbath, what are you saying that means?
What I'm saying is even in the Tanakh, they followed their practice. See, the English translation in the Tanakh does not follow the literal Hebrew. And this is where the Jews now, the Orthodox Jews, are even covering up their tracks with doing it with the way they do it. Because it says literally in the Hebrew that you, from the day after the Sabbath, which is the same word, you shall count 7 Sabbaths, plural. So the day after the Sabbath, singular, you shall count 7 Sabbaths, plural, not 7 weeks. It's a different word for week as for the Sabbath day. And this is how the Jews, you know, they make it look like they're doing it right. So, but you see in the LXE, they have it translated 7 full weeks, not 7 Sabbaths. So that's the difference between the Karaite Jews versus the Orthodox, and you know, and us versus the Orthodox Jews, is we use the literal Hebrew, not the Greek translation, not the English translation, but we, you know, years ago, whenever our forefathers decided how to do Pentecost, they did it according to the literal Hebrew.
Okay. So the Hebrew says Sabbaths, not weeks, so we have to count Sabbaths.
It's Shabbatot, not Shavuot.
Okay.
It's a very similar word.
I'm trying to make Don's version of Bible Works do what I want it to do. And it doesn't work when I put the cursor over the word. I have to go to my version.
Yeah. So, well, just to summarize what we've done so far, as we see that the reading it from the literal Hebrew is that the people who were the farmers were to bring a first fruits offering of their barley the day after the weekly Sabbath, and now the question from here is, and it's I mean, you could say the same words and take it 2 different ways, is, do we keep it from the morrow after the Sabbath, okay, with the emphasis on the day after the Sabbath, during the days of unleavened bread, or the day after the Sabbath during the days of unleavened bread?
Where does it say the days of unleavened bread?
Yeah, that's my question. Where it doesn't say anything about unleavened bread in here.
It says after the harvest.
Oh, you got to go back to the earlier verses because it's going through in a chronological order. So we have to start before verse 9.
So where do you want me to go?
Well,
You're making the we're making the assumption that God listed the weekly Sabbath, then He listed the spring holy days, and then He listed this, and then he lists Pentecost, that in Leviticus 23 they're done in chronological order.
Yes.
Which would make sense based on the way God does things, but it's not just specifically written that it says, okay, during this time.
But you could see how the Jews wanting to make sure that it's the morrow after the Sabbath in the days of unleavened bread, they're interpreting it as the Sabbath, the first day of unleavened bread, the annual Sabbath. So really it's a lot of your perspective. If you look at it that way, the other way seems stupid. Now us, looking at it literally, we see, well, how could you say weeks when it says count 7 Sabbaths? So really a lot of this is all based upon the position you're looking at this from originally is how you interpret it. So, so we in the past have interpreted it, I think the way that the Worldwide Church of God looked at it was the morrow after the Sabbath during the days of unleavened bread. Instead of the morrow after the Sabbath, in other words, the day after the Sabbath during the days of unleavened bread, which is a critical thing this year because, well, now we're on the first day, and it's a morrow after the Sabbath. So now which Sabbath do we do? This week's Sabbath or next week's Sabbath?
Right.
I've got a comment I'd like to make. I hope you don't get terribly angry over this, but
We never get angry.
everybody that I know is keeping Pentecost on 5/24, including the Orthodox Jews with their 7/6. Protestants, Catholics, Church of God, just about everybody except maybe a Monday keeper or Messianic that delayed his calendar 1 month this year, but everybody's keeping it on the 24th. It's a very unusual year.
I know. I like the idea.
And my question for you, Lauren, is with let me get this right, with the new moon, in other words, a conjunction new moon occurring a few hours before the spring equinox, are you on the same keeping of, with, the same weeks? In other words, are you keeping days of unleavened bread? You didn't delay a month if it's only a few hours before, right?
Yeah, I know of one group that looks at it that way. They postponed their calendar a whole month because of that.
Of a couple hours.
I didn't, because everything happened within a few hours.
On the same day. Yes. That was just a side question, not relevant to anything else, but I was saving up that question for you. Okay. Now, when we have a little bit of a conundrum like this, we next, if it's not clear in the, or it could be debated from a literal translation, then we could look to a biblical example. And there is a biblical example of counting in this situation.
Okay.
So, but there's a little bit of background information which people picks up before going to that place. In Joshua chapter 5, there's an example of them eating of the new grain the day after the Sabbath. But we need to understand that they already had new grain that they grew. And for that, you go to Numbers 32, I think. See if I remember it right. Where you have the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh request to have land on the east side of the Jordan River.
Did you say 22?
No, 32?
32.
Okay, where am I going? Who wants to read here? I'm not.
Well, I could read because it's my suggestion to read this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the Reubenites and Gadites owned cattle in very great
Where are
numbers.
you? On one?
Yes.
Yeah,
Reading
I got it up on the screen here.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Noting that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were a region suitable for cattle. The Gadites and the Reubenites came to Moses. Eleazar the priest and the chieftains of the community had said, Atarot, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elalah, Sebam, Nebo, and Beon, the land that the Lord has conquered for the community of Israel in cattle country, and your servants have cattle. It would be a favor to us, they continued, if this land were given to your servants as a holding, and not move us across the Jordan. And Moses replied to the Gadites and Reubenites, are your brothers to go to war while you stay here? Why will you turn the minds of the Israelites from crossing into the land that the Lord has given them? Is this what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to survey the land? Or that is what your fathers did? After going up to the Wadi Eshcol and surveying the land, they turned the minds of the Israelites from invading the land that the Lord has given them? Thereupon the Lord was incensed, and he swore that none of the men from 20 years up who came out from Egypt shall see the land that I promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for they did not remain loyal to me. None except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua, the son of Nun, for they remained loyal to the Lord. The Lord was incensed at Israel, and for 40 years he made them wander in the wilderness until the whole generation that had provoked the Lord's displeasure was gone. And now you, a breed of sinful men, have replaced your fathers to add still further to the Lord's wrath against Israel. And if you turn away from him and he abandons them once more in the wilderness, you will bring calamity upon all this people.
What'd you do?
Then they stepped up to him and said, we will build here sheepfolds for our flocks and towns for our children. And we will hasten as shock troops in the van of the Israelites until we have established them in their home, while our children stay in the fortified towns because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every one of the Israelites is in his possession of his portion. And we will not have a share with them in the territory beyond the Jordan, for we have received our share on the east side of the Jordan. And Moses said to them, if you do this, if you go to battle as shock troops at the instance of the Lord, And every shock fighter among you crosses the Jordan at the instance of the Lord until he has dispossessed his enemies before him. And the land has been subdued at the instance of the Lord, and then you return. You shall be clear before the Lord, before Israel, and this land shall be your holding under the Lord. But if you do not do so, you will have sinned against the Lord, and know that your sin will overtake you. Build towns for your children, and sheepfolds for your flocks, but do what you have promised. And the Gadites and Reubenites answered Moses, your servants will do as my Lord commands. Our children, our wives, our flocks, and all our other livestock will stay behind in the towns of the Gilead. And while your servants and all those recruited for war cross over at the instance of the Lord to engage in battle, as my Lord orders, then Moses gave instructions to Eleazar the priest, Joshua the son of Nun, and the family heads of the Israelite tribes. And Moses said to them, if every shock fighter among the Gadites and the Reubenites crosses the Jordan with you to do battle at the instance of the Lord, and the land is subdued before you, you shall give them the land of Gilead as a holding. But if they do not cross over with you as shock troops, they shall receive holdings among you in the land of Canaan. And the Gadites and Reubenites said in reply, whatever the Lord has spoken concerning your servants, that we will do. We ourselves will cross over as shock troops at the instance of the Lord into the land of Canaan, and we shall keep our hereditary holdings across the Jordan. And so Moses assigned to them, to the Gadites, the Reubenites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of the king Og of Bashan, the land with its various cities and territories of their surrounding towns. Well, I guess there's a long version you could go through to get every detail, but the point was to show that the summer before they went into the land, which is recorded in Joshua chapter 5, the Gadites, the Reubenites, and Asher actually took that land, and they were able to plant grain, even though it wasn't, they weren't all in the land. The Gadites and the Reubenites were able to plant grain and have Israelite planted and grown grain for the following spring, which is, I just wanted to show that Israel, while Moses was still there, the first 2.5 tribes of Israel inhabited this part of the land. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
So they had their own grain. So then if you go to Joshua chapter 5, that, I just kind of gave the background to Joshua chapter 5.
Where in 5?
Oh, you could start from verse 1.
Verse 1? Okay.
that's a lot of words. Well, basically, chapter 5, verse 1, the first 10, it just picks up from where we left off, that they had taken over that land east of the Jordan, and they were ready to cross over the Jordan at this point and take the rest of the land. So they were, they had established cities on the east side of the Jordan. And they were ready to go across the Jordan. It's just explaining, of course, if you're, the Amorites or the Phoenicians and all those people, the Philistines, they were quaking in their boots, They knew that these guys were coming. Yeah, the pleasant thing about the circumcision, those who weren't.
All right, here we are in verse 10, so where we're picking up the Passover.
Yeah, the 14th day of the month, toward evening. I think we understand that this is during the 14th day, toward evening is in the afternoon, that they killed the Passover lamb. And in 11, it says, they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes, parched corn in this self-same day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. So this is their own homegrown, Israelite-grown grain.
How far am I going or not going here, or are you?
I'm missing something here.
Yeah, they ate of the old grain.
Yes. So this is our example of we know that the eating of the new grain was the Feast of the First Fruits. So this is a point that I guess.
Okay, so they ate. What I'm reading is, on the day after the Passover offering, on that very day they ate the produce of the new produce of the land. So they were eating it on the first day of unleavened bread.
No, it says old corn. Doesn't say new corn.
In 11?
They did
LXC?
eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Sabbath.
Now read the next one.
Okay. Unleavened
LXC.
cakes and parched corn in the self-same day.
And the LXE?
They ate the grain of the earth, unleavened and new corn.
So they're saying they ate new corn and old corn.
Let's go to the original Hebrew here.
See,
That's what I'm reading.
Okay.
I just got us here. From here, we have to figure it out.
Eat, yield, earth or land, morrow, Passover, unleavened cakes, roasted or parched corn, or roast or parch, bone, okay, day, this day.
Now, it doesn't say old corn in the Hebrew.
But it does say young new corn in the Greek.
Yeah, but I don't think the Hebrew says the old corn.
Yeah, the Greek, the VEA, or, I've got the Greek up. The LXT up.
Right, the LXC we got.
It actually has young, new, young, younger, youngest.
Yeah.
New,
It's
fresh, but that's in the Greek.
The Tanakh doesn't say that they ate of the old grain.
Mm-hmm. They ate the produce of the country.
And King James said old corn. They bred that into it.
What's that now?
The King James translated, they read into their translation. In other words, it wasn't a literal translation in the King James. Or unless I'm not seeing it, but I don't see the old in the first half of Joshua 5:11.
But I still don't see how this tells us any timing. There's nothing here that tells you what day of when the 14th day. So if you take it this way, then what you're saying is that it goes back to Sivan 6.
No.
Because unless you can identify that what day of the week Passover was on, and what day the first holy day was on.
There's another day that says or another verse that says it's a Sabbath. I should probably.
That's the key. There would be the key. Yeah. What verse is that?
Let me get that up. Well,
because what we've seen here so far doesn't tell me a timetable. that the 14th day was
The Sabbath.
the Sabbath.
Or no, it's the 14th.
Because it says they started eating on the morrow after the Sabbath, on the first day of unleavened bread.
Oh, that's it. But it's the morrow after the...
Tomorrow after the Passover is all it says. It doesn't say that it was the weekly Sabbath also.
Okay.
It doesn't say the 14th day was the weekly Sabbath. So in other words, the 15th was a Sunday. And if that's the case, then the 15th was a Sunday.
So we determined that they did not eat of any of the old grain. They were eating manna until they ate the new grain. Because the King James has it wrong, right? Are we agreeing on that?
Well, they were still eating manna, and they had not ate of the local grain, yes, or whatever.
Yeah. See, the King James actually has that wrong. That gives people misunderstandings.
Oh, I'm going to talk to him. I did some research on that question. I started out by going to Exodus and finding out when the Exodus Passover happened, and I did it by counting the manna days. Then I used the calendar, a 360-day calendar, which I believe was in use, and went up to Joshua. The Passover at Joshua would have been on a Thursday. And the following day, they were eating unleavened bread or new and parched grain, and it was more or less the wave sheet offering on that Friday. Saturday, the manna ceased, and they ate the produce of the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna. But that was what my study came up with. I should mention that the Exodus Passover was on a Wednesday, and then Joshua's Passover was on a Thursday.
So the rule is that you don't eat of the new grain until the wave sheaf offering, right?
Right, and I believe Friday was the wave sheet offering after the Passover. And it was also the first day of unleavened bread.
Based on that, then that would, if that's the days, then that goes back the opposite way of everything we've thought we'd figured out, because that means that you do the wave sheaf on the morrow after the
Passover.
Yeah. See, that doesn't fit either.
Yeah, my understanding is that the wave sheet can be done on any, well, okay. I have to think this one out a little bit better.
You found what you were looking for, Mike?
Oh, I'm still looking for everything, so.
Okay.
There's an ocean behind them. We're getting this whoosh.
Yeah, that whoosh is coming from Lauren somehow.
Oh, okay. Keyboard.
See, even the Strong says that the King James translator screwed it up.
Yeah.
And they did eat, eat of the, and it isn't old corn, it's produce
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
of the land. I mean, even the Strong says King James translators did it. Back to Mr. Omick, the King James boys added old corn. Out of curiosity, has anybody, Mike, I don't know if you've gone through Don Ross calculator. What date has he got this on?
No,
That's
that's easy to find out.
The Passover, the 14th was a Sabbath according to his. Which that uses a present, back calculate, the present calculated calendar back calculated to the year that he figures is the year, which is the 40th, but see, anyway, that's what he figures. It was a Sabbath day. Well, should I give you a logical argument?
Only if you raise your mic up, because you're really soft.
Is this better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. It keeps getting bumped away from my mouth.
You've
Okay.
given us a logical argument that has left us no better
No,
off
I
than when we
just gave-
started.
I gave you the background. Now the logical argument part is the day of the Passover is the 14th day of the month. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you have the morrow after the Passover, it's the 15th day of the month. And they're eating new corn on the 15th day of the month. Which they cannot do if you look at it. Which circumstance could you eat new grain on the 15th day of the month?
This week, when the Passover is on the Sabbath.
That's the logical argument. So it's not explicit, it's implicit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
No. The reason the Jews call the 15th day of the month Passover is to make this scripture work. If you look on their calendar, the 15th day of the month is a Passover, So eating of the first fruits, see, they got it all. I mean, they got all their I mean, they got an explanation for everything, I should say. So we understand that the Passover is the day that you kill the lamb, right? It's the 14th day of the month. The morrow after the Passover is the 15th day of the month. But if you call the first day of unleavened bread the Passover, then the day after Passover is the 16th day of the month.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they got an explanation for everything. So here, if we follow through literally, that the Passover is the 14th day of the month, which we I think we believe, and that the first day of the month is the first day of unleavened bread, then they're eating this on the first day of unleavened bread, which rules out the morrow after the first day of unleavened bread. So it goes back to which day is Passover? Is it the 14th or the 15th?
I love that argument. It's one of my favorites. It just goes on and on and on.
Yes, but you see that's why the Jews call the first day of unleavened bread the Passover, because then this passage in Joshua makes sense.
If you read verse 12, using the logic,
Uh-huh.
and it says, and the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn. So we can pretty much probably eliminate the fact that, I don't know why I'm not getting what I want here. Old corn is not really correct on verse 12 either. It's just the produce of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. If you take that, that means the manna would have ceased, in our terminology here, would cease tomorrow. So they had manna on the morning of the first day of unleavened bread, so they could have something to eat. Then they went and did the wave sheaf offering, and then they could partake of the yield, the crops that were produced for the rest of the feast and the rest of the time.
But would they be gathering manna on the first day of unleavened bread, which is the Sabbath, if it's a Sabbath?
They were only told they could not gather manna on the seventh day. They were not told anywhere that I can remember that they could not gather manna on a high day. It was that you were to gather double portion on the sixth day so that you had it for the seventh day.
Yes.
Am I correct there?
Yes, on the first day of unleavened bread, you're allowed to prepare food. And so they did collect unleavened bread on the 14th, which was a Sabbath day, so they collected a double portion on the 13th. Then there was one more day, which there was manna on the 15th, which was a Sunday. And then they ate of the manna ceased on a Monday, right?
Right. Would have ceased the day after they did the Omer and that offering, and then it would have stopped.
Yes.
So I mean, natural mathematics and logic does set this time period as if it happened as it did this year, which would mean that they would have started counting today, and that it's the Omer that needs to fall within the holy days, not the Sabbath. Technically, between the 15th and the 21st, it's the Omer has to be offered up between the 15th and the 21st, not the weekly Sabbath is the criteria.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, I mean, we've done it both ways, I know, in the past, and I'm trying to get a better understanding and understand what the Scripture says. I personally, the background noise of what everybody else has done over the years just shows you how, in my opinion, Satan has corrupted it, and how mankind wants to think their logic and their knowledge is, not that we've got it right, but they want to rely on themselves and all of that to keep their traditions versus what the Scripture says.
Now,
You can see how you could read.
does this support Steve on 6?
No.
Okay, I was right. Okay.
It actually, like Mike said, it goes back and supports the fact that you do this. You do this after this would have been a Sunday, because that's the only way the 15th works, if you believe that. I mean, if you didn't think, well, if you do it the Omer the day after the holy day, it could be any time. This could have fallen on any day of the week.
Yes.
So that still doesn't, it doesn't support or deny that assumption one way or the other. What supported that was the fact that when you go back to Matthew, and you brought that up when we were talking about it, I did make a note of that, it says
Matthew what?
28:1. I think it was the same terms as used in somebody said something about it there that was the counting of the weeks. That it was the start of the counting of the weeks or whatever, when Mary and them came to the tomb.
Yes.
And so that supports the fact that that was a Sunday morning, and Christ is the Omer. And when was he presented to God, his Father? That would have been Sunday morning. So that is the tomorrow after the weekly Sabbath. And that also fits with, Anna and I have talked about this, with the issue of the 8th day, that everything is new on the 8th day, and sanctified and set apart to start new on the 8th day. Well, what's the 8th day? The 8th day is Sunday. If you're going to count consecutive, you went through a week, you've had the 7th day. Monday is, quote, the 8th day of some cycle, and the significance of the 8th day.
Yeah, beginning of the week, the beginning of counting,
Beginning of counting. It's you now have a raised Savior, and the things that were promised are now available because he's went to his Father and been accepted. So we have all those things available to us.
Now I'd like to go over, two things actually. The verse we have showing here, Matthew 28:1, it sounds like the day began at dawn, which was the first day of the week. Like sunrise to sunrise would be a full day. That everything I find in the Bible is kind of indicating that now. But getting back to Joshua and his wave sheet offering, if it was on a Thursday, which could have been Passover, Friday they ended up eating manna, getting a double portion, plus eating some of the old produce of the land. Saturday they would have still had manna, and it could have been Sunday that was the wave sheet offering because they found the new produce and waved it. And that could be one explanation that might be possible.
Well, in Joshua 5, verse 11, it says that they ate of the new grain on the morrow after the Passover. So they ate it on the 15th of Abib. The 15th day of the first month is when they, Joshua 5 verse 11 says that they ate of it. So the difference in the understanding is the first day of unleavened bread Passover, or is the 14th day of the first month Passover? And the modern rabbinic Jews, the Orthodox Jews, have the 15th day of the first month as a day they call Passover. They don't mention the 14th day with Passover.
There is a verse that says Passover is from the 14th to the 21st. That is 8 days. There's another verse that says to eat unleavened bread 7 days during the Passover, from evening to evening. With that calendar that I'm looking at, with sunrise to sunrise as being a day, the middle of the first day on the 14th would have been evening, and then count 7 full days till the 21st on evening, and you have, you know, your 7 days in between, with a half day preceding on the 14th and a half day at the end of, in the evening on the 21st. It's one way of just saying, yeah, there's 7 days of eating unleavened bread, but 8 days of Passover.
I could give a little bit of an explanation on that.
Can I make before you get into it?
Uh-huh.
I was looking at the Matthew 28 in the Greek, and another way of saying as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week is as the first day of the week was dawning. It just means that the sun was coming up on the first day of the week. It doesn't necessarily say that the day began at dawn. It just says the first day of the week was becoming light. Okay, you may continue.
Okay, this gets back to the, the original, teaching in Leviticus 23 versus later colloquialisms. So nowhere in the Old Testament does it say that the 7 days of unleavened bread are the Passover. But, it's like when we say, where are you going for the feast? We all know what we're talking about, right? It's colloquialism. And that same thing happened by the time of Jesus' day, where the first hog festival they just called the Passover, the whole thing. And then they called the whole thing Pesach as a colloquialism. And then the second hog festival was Shavuot, which means weeks. So you got to know which weeks they're talking about. In other words, you need to have the prior information to know what the colloquialism is. And then the third hog festival they called Sukkot. So they called the whole thing from, Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, all. That was the third hog festival, Sukkot. So technically speaking, the Pesach is the lamb that was slaughtered on the 14th day of the month, which was not even a high day at all. It was a preparation day. So technically speaking, the Pesach only refers to the lamb that was slaughtered. It's referred to the whole spring holy day in a colloquial manner, not a technical manner. And our Pesach is Christ who was crucified. And there you could get into a whole other colloquialism, because people think, well, the Christ is our, we have Christ. We don't have, you know, we don't keep the holy days because we have Christ. Well, I'm making long story short, if you study it all back totally, the Pesach was the lamb that was slaughtered, not the day on which it was done, and not the days of unleavened bread. And by people getting that mixed up, they get mixed up when to slaughter the lamb. They get mixed up when to eat the lamb. And nowadays they get mixed up with whether you need to keep anything at all, because Christ is our Passover. But now if you flip it around and you understand that Christ is our Pesach lamb that was offered, and that's what that refers to, then you understand, well, the Pesach is the lamb that was slaughtered on the 14th day, which was a preparation day, not a high day. And so to call the first day of unleavened bread Pesach is a pure colloquialism, not technically correct. That's the long story short version, which you could go into a long, long, long story on that one.
So we drawing a conclusion from all this.
I want to think about it, but right now I'd have to say that if you look at Joshua and use some basic logic of when would the 15th day fall on a Sunday, what would have to happen, that would coincide with what's going on this year. And it appears that they ate new grain, you know, effective that afternoon or on the 16th day, and that would mean that they started to count from actually today.
Relative to our year this year, yes.
Yes. Those two are in the same sequence of days of the week, and that they would have started on the 15th, and that it's the actual Omer sacrifice which is more important in setting that it falls during the holy days than the Sabbath. It's that sacrifice which then coincides with what happened when Christ was crucified. And if you know, you follow the Wednesday through Sunday, and that you know, that Mary and them came to the tomb on Sunday morning after the Sabbath had ended, and were going to do the things, and he had been resurrected and was being presented to us. He was going up to be presented to his Father as what the Omer represents. But I think I want to, at this point in time, I mean, we don't have to make a decision immediately, but it's something that I think needs to be still studied a little and looked at, and let God, you know, inspire the decision.
Yeah, there's another interesting verse about sunrise to sunrise. In John 20:19, it talks about the evening of the first day of the week when Christ met with his disciples after he came back from heaven. and breathed on them the Holy Spirit or whatever. But it talks about evening of the first day, which I believe would be the middle of that first day.
Where'd you say that was, Lauren?
John 20:19.
I have to read it for all of it in context, but I don't know, is this how much after his resurrection was this? That evening word just is a
Just in Hebrew, there's 3 parts of the day, which is the daylight portion. And the boker is the morning. And the Yam, Yam is the word for the whole day, and Boker is the morning, and Erev is the sun is going down. And once the sun, after the sun has gone down, and there's there's stars in the sky and it's dark, the word for that is Lila, which from there, they maybe broke it down into watches, but there's only one word for night, and that's Lila. And there's 3 words, the general word is Yam for day, and Boker is morning, and then the afternoon is Erev. And then as far as what we call sunset, that word is Shekiah. And that's the event of the sun making all the colors in the sky as it's setting. And Shekiah is a subword from meaning glory, the glory of the day. And it's similarly called that early in the morning before the sun rises in the morning. That's a glory of the day when you have all the nice colors and everything. So Erev is not the nighttime. Lila is the nighttime.
I got a verse here, John 11:9, where Christ mentions, are not there 12 hours in a day? 12 hours in a day would mean that we can't really say twilight, which would be hour and a half after sunset, or dawn, which would be an hour before sunset. Otherwise, you'd have a 14-hour day and a 10-hour night. It has to be, evenly divided 12-hour day.
There again, that's a colloquialism because hours is a term derived from the sun god worship, Horus. And that was broke down, because they were in the Babylonian system, was, their system of that day. It was a colloquialism he used that they understood. Because why there's 12 hours in a day is because there's 12 constellations which the sun goes through in the day. And then, 12 at night is the reason in the zodiac. So he was using again, a colloquial term of the day, not a biblical definition.
And there's really only 2 days of the year that are divided equally, and that would be the spring and fall equinox, where the sun is right over the equator. Because as soon as it crosses either north or south, you get more daylight or more night, either way.
Except exactly on the equator, which is pretty much 12 hours. But see, Jerusalem being quite a bit north of the equator, they had a variation in the daylight portion. But the concept of the 12 hours in the day was a purely astrological concept which was common to their day, and it was a term which they understood, because there's 12 Horuses in the day, 12 stations to which Horus passes through in the astrological model, which was the basis for, in other words, same as us saying Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, or Wednesday. We know Wednesday isn't Wednesday. We understand that, you know. And the thing is that Jesus did have a problem. He wouldn't have a problem saying Wednesday, or Thursday, or Freya's Day, you know, because we see from his example that he used the local colloquial terms. You know, because I know people that will only say first day, second day, third day, fourth day, because they don't want to use the pagan word. But the concept of 12 hours in a day goes back to Assyria, where they divided the day into 60 minutes, 60 seconds, 60 minutes, 12 hours for the day, 12 hours for the night, and that was a pure astrological system based upon the Assyrian, which became the Babylonian astrology. It's a pure astrological number, just like our use of the word Wednesday is a pure pagan terminology which has pagan significance of who ruled over that day. You know, we give no credence to Woden by using the word Wednesday. Some people think we do, you know, that we acknowledge Woden if we say Wednesday. You see what I'm saying?
So where are you at, Don?
Well, I'm seeing that there's really, as far as I'm concerned, no absolute information here. I'm seeing a lot of logic being applied to what we see. I am comfortable for this year until we encounter this again, just counting from today. What's your thoughts? I mean,
I can't fault that. Like I said, I want to think on it and pray about it, but I think, you know, we have to apply, you know, reasonable logic. But I think what we've applied in the past has been trying to avoid following what other people did, and we've also tried to. I think the more I'm learning, we've put more emphasis on the day you start from being after a weekly Sabbath versus being what day are you offering the Omer up? What time period does it fall into? And I think the Omer is the sacrifice, not so, you know, having it fall during the spring holy days, I think may be more important to fit with other symbols, and, you know, especially with Christ, fitting that more than what day, that the day, the morrow after falls in the, you know, doesn't
That's the subject of the sentence. Not the Sabbath day isn't the subject. That's a defining thing. It's
Right. Is it the Sabbath day that has to fall in the holy days, or is it the Omer that needs to fall in between the holy days?
the Omer needs to fall within the holy days, is what we're thinking here.
Yeah, I
Yes.
agree with
That's
that.
what
It's the Omer.
That's what I'm leaning towards too, but I want to let it sink in a little bit and think on it a little more. But right now, that's where I would lead to also.
You have 7 weeks to study this.
Yes, I do. Or I got 7 weeks for God to give me a better answer.
Or a definitive answer.
Yes, one of the two. And depending on what that answer is, it could be either 7 or 8 weeks.
Well, this whole thing. Well, Mark has left us. He got his answer. He knows we're counting from today.
Oh.
He's gone. I think it's interesting. Others are looking at the Omer greater importance than what we've made it. Hal made it clear that the Omer is something we've overlooked, and we need to make it of greater importance. And the resurrection of Christ, we need to acknowledge. Now we're looking here, and we're seeing the Omer is more important than the day. So I think there's a spirit here. God's trying to show us something.
Oh, I don't disagree. I just want him to show it to me, and I mean, it's been a good study in a lot of ways, and a lot of good topics brought up, and concepts. But, 2 hours, not that I hadn't looked at it before, but a 2-hour major study on it doesn't set it in stone for me yet.
Yes.
There's not a whole lot to study. I mean, there isn't like there's hundreds of verses. We just got what happened in Joshua and the commandment given in Leviticus.
Well,
Yeah.
I have to bring up though, we are of the understanding that Passover refers to the 14th day of the month, as the early church was, and Polycarp and Polycrates' day, for the first 150 years, is that Passover is the 14th. Otherwise, they would have called their controversy the Quartodecimate, the 14th day controversy. You see, so, and what Lauren is bringing up is some other things. Well, maybe the 14th day isn't, the Passover isn't referring to the 14th day. So we need to look at more things, but there is more to it we could bring in. So it is probably good to review it and to go over it and look for other things, too. It's to question our assumptions. So I agree with Jeff that it's it's probably good to keep looking and learning.
Well, the day we stop, that's the day that we've really screwed up. Those of us, if anybody thinks they have it all and they've got it down and they don't have room for growth or better understanding, then that's when you better question yourself. I know that's when I better. So, and with everything else going on, I'm learning to walk a little slower and rely on somebody else a whole lot more.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just the big thing about this whole starting of the count is everyone kept trying to smash it into a box, and I kept saying, no, it has nothing to do with the box. It has everything to do with the grain. When is it ready? It's a harvest. It's the Omer. It's not the Sabbath after this has to fall. Where are those rules? And we're seeing there aren't any.
Yeah, we're seeing what we looked at in Joshua was the example of what they did that year, and just thought it through. That, well, if the 14th day is the Passover, now if the 15th day of the month is the Passover, or if the whole days of unleavened bread is the Passover, you could come up with other conclusions. But we did. I think we saw that they ate it on the day after the Passover, or and with our present understanding that the Passover is on the 14th, well then Joshua chapter 5, they kept it on the 15th day of the first month, is what we're saying, you know, is based upon our understanding. But it never hurts to keep looking at other factors.
I think I got enough to think on.
Yep.
I actually have a question for Lauren about a couple of verses. So when everybody else is ready to go, if Lauren would stay on, I have a question.
Well, I have a question about the Feast of Tabernacles in Iowa.
You do you?
Yes. You don't know how many people